Good morning, students. Today we are going to talk about isoquants and isocosts. So, isoquants and isocosts are a technique to identify the most efficient level of production and use of inputs given the resources available with any company or firm or manufacturing industry. So how, given the limited resources a company has, the money which it has, how should it decide how much to produce and at what cost using what level of inputs? So this idea is based on the idea that the most efficient way of producing a good will be decided by the budget of the company and the technology which is being used for production. So there are two aspects, the budget and the production aspect. So first we look at the production, then we look at the budget. The production aspect is also called isoquants, where each isoquant is a curve which represents a certain level of production. So this, let's say the production function for a particular good is given as Q is a function of the labor and capital which it can use, where labor and capital can be substituted for each other. So suppose more machines are used, the company can use less of labor, or it can use more of labor and use less of capital. So using these two inputs, it can produce the amount of output it wants, where Q is the minimum level of output or the maximum level of output which the company can produce with the two units or the different units of two inputs. So the isoquant curve here is a representation of the different combinations of two inputs which can produce the same level of output. That means a set of isoquants which you can see on the right side is called the isoquant map. Now each isoquant here, which is IQ1, IQ2 or IQ3, you can take any one of them. Each isoquant represents a level of output. Let's say IQ1, which represents 100 units of output. Now this 100 units of output can be produced using less of capital and more of labor, or it can be produced using more of capital and less of labor. So depending on what combination, what efficiency the particular producer wants, they can decide the combination they want of both capital and labor. Now we have not yet got into the affordability because that is separate aspect of this particular concept. We'll come to in 2-3 minutes. So each isoquant here is depicting a unique level of output. For IQ1 it is 100 units, for IQ2 it is 200 units, for IQ3 it is 300 units, okay, which can be produced with different combination of inputs, where every point on each isoquant represents a particular combination of capital and labor, and this each point is producing, because it's on the same isoquant, the same level of output. Even though you are using more of capital and less of labor, you are producing 100 units. You can also find a point where you are using more of labor and less of capital to produce the same 100 units of output. Alright? Now, every higher isoquant, as you can see in the isoquant map, represents a higher level of output, and a lower isoquant represents a lower level of output. In the isoquant map which you have on the right side, we have three levels of output: 100 units, 200 units and 300 units. Now let's take the IQ2 where we had 200 units of output. Now this is an imaginary IQ where we are taking different combinations for a particular production function, different combinations of labor and capital, where each combination can produce the same level of output. But as you can see here in the beginning, at when the units of labor is 1, the units of capital is 15, and you want to produce the same level of output by decreasing capital and increasing labor. So you can increase your labor by 100%, you will have to decrease your capital by very little, less than 10%. But when you reach the, when you want to move from point B to point C, where you are using more of labor still, So you add one more worker, that means 50% increase in workforce from 2 to 3. There is a drop in use of capital from 11 to 8. That means 3 units of capital had to be sacrificed to hire one more worker. So one extra worker is doing the same work as 3 units of capital at this point in C, where compared to B, where you are using now less of capital and more of labor. Now when you compare point B to point C on the same isoquant again, where you are still producing 200 units of output, when you use one extra worker from 3 to 4 units of workers or labor, you have to reduce units of capital from 8 to 6. That means 25% decrease. The increase in worker is one third, that is 33%, whereas the decrease in capital is just 25%. So now you need one worker for 2 units of capital. So earlier we see when we move from B to C, we have one worker is equal to 3 units of capital. Now when we move from 3 to 4, we are one worker is doing the same work as 2 units of capital. When you move from D to point E, one worker is equal to 1 unit of capital, because you can replace 1 unit of capital with one worker. So as you can see, the productivity of labor is decreasing as the units of labor are increasingly used in production. This is nothing but the diminishing marginal productivity, which we have learned earlier. Alright, so this represents two different concepts. One is your more inputs, you can produce more. A higher isoquant represents a higher level of output, and you are also representing diminution of marginal productivity with the curved shape of the isoquant. Alright, okay. So each input here, A, B, C, D and D of capital and labor represents the same level of output, 200 units of output, with different combinations of capital and labor.